A lot of times there's a lot of confusion, and this is worth the whole the whole thing. So, sorry, one second. So again, a lot of times there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of confusion around what is worth something when you renovate it, right? And what happens are how much. And I put $50,000 into my house renovating, therefore my house goes from $400 to $450. And no, not the case. So what it is, and this is just
unless you put $50,000 of solid gold bricks in your fireplace surround.
There you go. The appraiser can account for personal property.
Well, so if you build it in, then it's not personal property, and so the value of the material itself would.
So you go into a neighborhood, right? So you go to the contract's $400,000. So there's comparables. Let's say on the low end of the house in that neighborhood, in that market, at let's say $350, and those are the houses that have not been renovated, that have been just poorly maintained, or don't have all the upgrades. They got, let's say carpet instead of hardwood. They have standard kitchen appliances instead of the upgraded.
So they're in Sterling Park.
They're exactly right. They're Sterling. And so those are the lower end. And then you have, let's say, the highest end. These guys, it's owned by a guy who bought the model, and he has all the upgrades, and you're at let's say the 410 range, right? You don't want to be any higher than the, let's say, mid-range to mid-higher end of your neighborhood when it comes to renovation conditions. And because you're not going to get anything more than what those are. And the basic reason is this, is that let's say I own a $400,000 house, and let's say I had some extra money, and I wanted to put in a pool, a patio, and all this other things, and just make it the biggest, baddest thing in the neighborhood. Okay, well, it's still a $400,000 neighborhood, and the homeowners next to you and everyone next to you is the schools, everything that's included, the lot size, the convenience, and all those things are included. So if you were going to put more in, I would just go buy a better house in a bigger neighborhood or a better neighborhood. Well, so you end up capping yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that.
Here's where I'm going to summarize it.
Build a $500,000 house in a $400,000 neighborhood.
Correct.
We have an old saying in the underwriting, in underwriting circles, we would have a saying. It's very simple. It's, you've got a castle in a swamp.
Correct.
Don't own a castle in a swamp.
Now, Jason, do you run across a lot of buyers or sellers or people who have, maybe more particularly homeowners, not necessarily buyers or sellers, right? They're on the refi side, who are in a mild, let's say, there's a disconnect in expectations when they renovated their house. Does that happen a lot?
I don't know what a refi is anymore.
There you go.
That's the right answer.
Years ago.
There you go.
But speaking on the purchase side, we have a lot of good agents here in Frederick, Maryland, and they've been really good about educating their buyers, in the last few years, and I think that's really helped. So they're not going in with these crazy expectations. But you're right with the refinancing. I was going to mention is, I asked you if we could do a list and provide it to the appraiser. The biggest thing that's going to come back is I told the buyer's going to say I told the appraiser I had new faucets and they didn't notate it in the appraisal.
Yep.
And so that's where I was thinking, when we did do a lot of refis, that's kind of what happened, I told, I did the appraisal, and, I feel like it should have appraised for more. Zillow said it should have appraised for more. So,
the good old Zillow, right? That's funny. Good old Zillow. That's one of those things where that has caused, so my opinion is Zillow, right? It's so accurate. It's accurate enough to just kill yourself. I mean, to be dangerous, because you deal with a situation to where
killing yourself is dangerous.
I'm just saying it's a very dangerous thing, because it's like you use it and you're like, oh, yeah. I mean, the contract price is $400. It says $397 or $402. Like, must be accurate. And then next one is, contract price is $400. It says it's worth $220. You know what I mean? And it's just completely off. And that has been, it's a free tool, right? So you can't complain. But that has been sort of the, and again, generally it's good, but it's just, that has been kind of a, so I always tell people, you got to look at the listings, right? You got to filter it and just look at the listings and say, okay, what are listings for in this market? And if the listings are close and you can find comparables that are similarly looking to the subject, just go off the list price, right? Because you got a townhouse.
Now, I got a question since you touched on that. I got a question on the contract. I put you can't do an appraisal without a contract, and the contract has the sale price on it.
Yep.
Why do you need that? Why is that so important? Aren't you supposed to be appraising? And this is kind of a personal question because I wanted to ask you guys. Aren't you supposed to appraise it for what it's worth? I always have people ask me that. So
what
does it matter what the sale price is? You tell me what it's worth. Don't matter about the sale price.
So at its simplest way, right, the contract is a comparable, and actually you're technically allowed to use the contract as a additional value comparable in a increasing and or decreasing market to kind of staple it. So if somebody says, okay, what is more relevant than the market in action? Right, so you got somebody who's willing to put $400,000 down on this property, write the check right there today. So to an appraiser, that is the most relevant form of current market data. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the house is worth, or that doesn't necessarily mean what the house is appraised for. That's just a very good indication of, you know, if you had all the contracts that were currently under contract that haven't closed, and you found out that all the contracts were worth $380 and $370, and you got a house here under contract for $400, that's going to influence a little bit of the comparables you're looking at, especially if you can go back and say, well, hey, I had ones that sold in October for $420 and December for $410, and this one's $400, and I got other contracts at $380. Ooh, we got a decreasing market. Or reverse of that, if you have previous sales at $380 and you've got one contract at $400 for the subject, and you see all the listings are at $410 and $420, you're going to think to yourself, well, I got a little bit of data here now that says there may be an increasing market, right? And so that's why it's relevant. Now, sometimes it's not, but it's a great way of kind of benchmarking what's going on in that current market, and it's the most relevant form of a comparable for the subject.
So if I'm buying a house, if I have a contract at $400,000 and the appraiser's doing his job, the contract's at $400, but the value is really $415, are they going to appraise it at $400, or are you going to give me the $415?
No, they'll do $415 if that's what the comparables and the data indicates.
So that they'll do $415. Yeah, they'll do $415. But it's relevant. That $400 is relevant, and that $400 is relevant because you really have the market in action. I mean, that's your closest representation to the market in action and the worth of that market.
Yeah. I would say this.
Refi, you like on a refinance. Do you guys want to know what the client thinks the estimate is, or what we need to know for the loan? Does that play any impact on what the appraisal is going to come in at?
So personally, just
no, it shouldn't.
No, it does not at all. So they're actually outlawed.
The borrower's always like, I think it should appraise for $380. Here's all my research, and then when we order the appraisal, it says estimated value. Why is that important? Why should I put estimated value on there if that doesn't affect it? And I kind of know the answer to this, but there's probably a lot of people that don't. So
yeah, so it's a good question.
It's a good question.
So number one, it's illegal to send that to the appraiser on a refi. Yep. So just so everyone knows that, like, that's actually like a law. We ask for it because we want to know, just for our QC purposes. Like, from my perspective, if we think, or if the borrower thinks their house is worth $400,000, and the appraisal comes in at $600,000 or $300,000, or it's way off, well, to me, there's a little bit of like, I want to kind of know why. I'll sit there and ask kind of that question to myself and an appraiser. Personally, I actually liked it when the estimation of value was included, because it gave you an idea of where to start, right? and not that you're going to start with a particular value and kind of, but it gives you a place at least to where it's another person's local educated opinion, right? Like in your house, in your neighborhood, you lived there for the last 10 years or whatever, and you know what homes sold, you know what your neighbor's home. You may have even went to a couple open houses.
Yep.
In your market. Like I know for instance in my neighborhood, if there's an open house, I'll probably go check it out, maybe just to kind of see, and ask how much.
Open out and see if there's going to be like a yard sale.
There you go. Exactly, right. And it gives you an idea of the estimate. It gives you an idea of the value, right? And so I kind of didn't influence my decision as far as the value, but it gave me a little bit of shading. As far as where's a good place to start, because you got to start somewhere.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
I think the thing that we missed is that on that value, we were talking about value. I know you want to wrap up here. We were talking about like that the value comes in low. We never gave like what's the best way to.
Okay.
You know, I know what I like to do, but what do you guys want us to do as far as the community? The appraisal came in low. Everyone's upset. What's the best steps to get that resolved or get that answer? What do we do?
Okay. So the first thing is you want to contact your AMC, okay, because every AMC has a bit of a different process as far as how they handle these things. Now, for us, we try to make this as easy as we possibly can. You contact your relationship manager, you fill out a form, you send some data in, and you're good to go. We submit the reconsideration to the appraiser. So there's a few things that are very important to keep in mind. The first is make sure that whatever you're submitting for reconsideration, okay, if you're providing additional comparables, if you're disputing material data in the report itself, GLA or room count, okay, you want to come with whatever evidence you have up front to make the best case you can, because you've got to remember, you're only going to get one reconsideration. You're only going to get one shot at this to get this thing right, okay? And what you don't want to do is come in unprepared and miss your opportunity, because you can't come back a second time. So you want to make sure you're looking at those things. So for example, if you're getting additional comparables, make sure they're more recent or as recent as the comparables in the report. Make sure the GLA is close, okay? Make sure the neighborhood is correct. Make sure you're not crossing a major barrier, highway, or street to get a new comp, because that's going to fundamentally change neighborhood characteristics. So you've really got to look at the accuracy of the information that you're submitting and make sure that you're taking your best shot up front to get the reconsideration. That's my advice. Now, you know, the other side of that is you've got to realize, and you know, more often than not, the appraiser will have very good reasons for not including a certain comp, okay, or for not including or giving value to a certain feature, or for making an adjustment a certain way, or what have you. So there's two ways to look at a reconsideration, and the issue here is in a lot of cases, folks only look at one side of it, which is I want to dispute the value and try to get the appraisal, you know, get the value higher. That's generally the main way that folks look at this, but you got to look at it from two perspectives. That's a potential outcome, but if you look at it from the perspective of I want to get my questions answered to make sure I've got the best quality report. I have the best comps, I have the best data, I have the best information. Because if the report is, you've got to make sure, we've got to make sure the report is the most accurate that it can be, then the value is right, or the value will be right, okay? If you've got an inaccurate report, or you've got bad comparables in a file, you're going to have an issue with the value. The value won't be, either won't be supported, or it won't be high enough, or what have you. So just the same way that we're calling into question, did the appraiser use the best available data, you've got to really ask yourself that question up front. Am I giving the best available data to dispute what's in this report? And that's really the key. So again, we've got to approach it as, don't approach it as you're trying to change the value on the report, because That rarely happens,
Right.
to be fair, okay? But if you approach, and also, too, approaching it that way with an appraiser immediately puts the appraiser on the defensive, Jason. As you've mentioned, you've made great points on this earlier about, look, realtors are pros, too. They don't want to have to admit that they're wrong. Appraisers are pros. They don't want to admit that they're wrong, right? So in this case, it's not an issue of anyone saying, hey, someone's wrong, someone's not. It's, or we need to change this or we need to change that. It's kind of back to what we were talking about earlier. We need clarification, okay? We need clarification, and we need to understand this report the way that the appraiser understands the report. It's got to make the same kind of sense to us as it does to them, because if we approach it from a service issue standpoint of, let's get you an answer. Let's get you an answer, because here's what I can tell you. If you submit a value reconsideration to me, I can't guarantee you anything about what may or may not change in the report.
But you can guarantee an answer.
But I can, right, exactly. But I can guarantee you'll get a response, because that I can make the appraiser do. I can't make the appraiser change anything in the report. I can't influence them in that way, and I don't want to. But I can darn sure make them answer the questions that are being asked, because about the file. And if the appraiser pushes back on that, the response is simple. The borrower needs an answer on this. At the end of the day, this isn't about the AMC, and about the loan officer, and about the appraiser. No. The borrower wants an answer. The borrower needs an answer on this. We are all, the one person involved in this transaction who is not a professional in the mortgage industry, who doesn't deal with this every day, and who doesn't have any idea of what's going on, is the borrower. So it's on us, as the AMC, as the appraiser, to give them the best possible answer, to give them the answer and to try to educate them as to how we got there. And that I can make the appraiser do if there's a reconsideration request. I can't make them change the value, but I can make them provide an answer. And that's really the way that I would recommend to clients that they look at the reconsiderations, is that we really need the answer. We want the answer. We want the data. Why?
Yeah, and from an appraiser's perspective, so again, to my previous comment, so you've lived there for 10 years, right? I'm there for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. It's impossible for me to know everything about this property, right? It's just, you're going to miss something, right? You're going to miss, and sometimes for the better or for the worse, right? Like, you miss something but what I would be kind of is assume that they don't know everything, okay? And that if there's something missing, it was definitely on accident, right? And you want to just provide that information. And to your point, give them the corrective data, because what you're dealing with on an appraiser side is, okay, Jason, I give you this address, 112 Johnson Street. It's in Hagerstown, right? And it's 2 acres, and it's a ranch, and the guys modified the house, and I got to go find other comparable sales that are similar to that property. And a lot of times the guy wasn't even there during the inspection if it's a purchase, right? So I got to read all the MLS information. I got to walk through the whole property. So if the guy's not there, it's in the middle of nowhere in Hagerstown, I'm running around this thing. What could I miss is a good question, right? And then going and looking at comparable sales, you're not dealing in a perfect environment. You've got 6 to 8 months that you're working with, maybe a year of market data that you're working with. Sometimes you'll have 50 comps. Sometimes you'll have 5, right? If the house is a unique property, 2, 3 bedrooms, and then add on that, the MLS information's wrong. So a lot of times when I'm doing a search,
and it often is,
if I'm doing a search and I put in 3-bedroom comparables or 4-bedroom comparables, well, sometimes people include the basement comparables. So I'll look and I'll see that this house is a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom, and in reality it's a 2-bedroom with 2 bedrooms in the basement because it's a split level, but it appears as a 4-bedroom.
Right.
So then I gotta go and literally go through, let's say, 100 comparables one by one and look at and see, okay, is this really a 3-bedroom townhouse, or is it a 2-bedroom townhouse with a basement, or is it really a 3-bedroom but it says 4 because there's 2 in the basement, and my subject is an actual, let's say, 3 or 4 bedroom house. And then when you look at the square footage, depending on where you're at, like, so for instance in Montgomery County, if you've got a split level or a split foyer, they include the basement GLA in the overall square footage, and it just says it has no basement. Whereas if I have a colonial, they'll include the first 2 floors as so you just take those concepts and you think, what could go wrong during the data research process?
This is why, this is why I hate split level properties.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Well, you take that and you think, what could go wrong? What could go wrong?
So it doesn't count, right? The bedroom below in a split foyer, it doesn't count.
Correct.
It does not. Well, yeah, it doesn't count as above GLA square footage, right? So you're dealing with a situation that when you come back to the appraiser, I mean, a lot of times, and again, and to this point, Jason.
And by the way, people don't accept that explanation even after you provide it.
Right. So to that point, Jason, and you need this thing like yesterday.
Yep.
Right. You know what I mean? It's not like you got a month to do this. You need this thing like yesterday. So I get the appraisal. You need it in 7 days. I call the bar. The bar doesn't call me back for a day or two. I go out and see it, on Monday or Tuesday if it's Friday now. You need it, Thursday, Friday at the latest. So it's Monday, Tuesday. I go out and inspect it. I'm trying to find comparables. Wednesday, you're calling me for an update. Thursday, you expect it. Friday, you're pissed. And it's just, there's a lot of things that...
Monday, they're screaming at me.
Monday, they're screaming at Fritz. And there's just a lot of little things that could go wrong. And you want to kind of approach it from a perspective of updating information. Assume the best.